what are coaches in the trenches doing to produce consistent results over time. You need to force your body to adapt. You need to create high levels of intramuscular force production. That I care about exponentially more, way more than I will ever care about studies. All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Renegade Radio. I am your host, Jay Ferrugia. I have been a coach professionally for 28 years, helping people get bigger, stronger, faster, leaner, and become the most elite, strongest, most badass version of themselves. That is what we continue to do each and every week here on the show. We'll continue doing that today. Today's topic, self-destruction. Little KRS-One there for you. I don't know if anyone caught that. It is the top 5 muscle building mistakes that kill your gains. So we're going to get right into it, guys. Number 1, as I've said countless times, is doing too much volume. People fail to make gains because they do too much. There was a recent meta-analysis, which is a study of multiple studies. Now, I am not Mr. Studies, right? I prefer real-world experience. I like to get other coaches, colleagues, trainers in here and discuss it. Before the internet even existed, before social media existed, this is how we gain knowledge. We looked at successful coaches. What are they doing? How are they achieving results? Are they achieving similar results with lots of people repeatedly? And that's how we would all gain knowledge. You know, me starting in the early 90s, and people in the 80s, 70s, 60s, 50s before me. You know, we would talk about or talk to guys like George Hackenschmidt and Arthur Saxon and Bill Pearl and Steve Reeves and Larry Scott and Vince Gironda and Bill Starr, Louis Simmons, all these kinds of coaches. And then, you know, what we would do is you'd get together, you'd go to a conference, and you'd become friends with other coaches. And back in the early 90s, again, I would trade ideas with Mark Bell and Elliot Hulse and Eric Cressy and Joe DeFranco and John Alvino and colleagues of mine and Joe Ken. And we'd go to these events and Brett Contreras and we'd go to events and we'd exchange numbers and become friends. And that's how you learn. And to this day, that's what I want to know first and foremost, is what are coaches in the trenches doing to produce consistent results over time. That I care about exponentially more, way more than I will ever care about studies. But I can use studies here and there to not necessarily learn why something works, but maybe validate why what we have found in the trenches to work actually does work, right? I think that's how science should work. So there was a recent meta-analysis, which again is a study of multiple studies, because one study, 3 studies doesn't show us a lot. But multiple studies, 14 studies, 50 studies, then we can kind of take some of that information and put it to good use. So they compared people doing 5 sets per body part per week, 10 sets, 15 sets, and 20 sets, and those in the 5 and the 10 group got the best results. I have found, as have many other successful coaches, that about 10 sets, 8 to 10 sets average per body part, maybe up to 12 per week, really does elicit the best gains. If you have great genetics, and it could be muscle or body part dependent, right? So if you have great genetics for chest development, you might only need 6 sets. If you have terrible genetics for back development, you might need 12 sets. It really kind of depends, right? But multiple people have found that number to be a sweet spot over the years, and now we have the studies, the meta-analysis to back that up. Now, an interesting caveat is this: when rest periods are longer, meaning 2 to 3 minutes between sets, you actually need less volume to achieve the desired result, because each set is of a higher quality and you're able to recruit more muscle fibers and, you know, produce more force. There's higher intramuscular force production on each set. That drops off a little bit if you cut your rest periods down to 90 seconds, 60 seconds, 45 seconds. So you would actually need more sets if you use lower rest periods. Now, there's a time and place for that, right? So we could be completely black and white and say there's never a time and place for that. But if you are old and strong and beat up and have a lot of injuries and wear and tear on your joints, that may be the way you have to train. So instead of doing 6, 8, 10 sets a week per body part, you may have to do 15 or 20 because you're doing them with high reps and low rest period, because it's the only way you can limit the load enough to make your joints feel good. So again, it really kind of does depend on the individual. Now, to sum this up, and again, make mistake number one, using too much volume, here's what I would say in bullet points. Don't do more than 8 to 10 sets per week per body part. Don't do more than about 12 to 16 total work sets per workout. Don't do more than around 15 reps per set. Again, if you are banged up and your joints kill no matter what, now you may have to do 20 plus reps, and that's okay. This is just general recommendations for most of the people most of the time. Generally, you don't want to take those circuit style classes and, low rest periods, supersets, giant sets, things like that. Generally a waste of time. This also applies to cardio. So you don't want to overdo that. Either you do 2 to 3 low intensity sessions per week, and 1 high intensity session generally is enough for most people most of the time. All right, mistake number 2 is not lifting heavy enough. You need to force your body to adapt. You need to create high levels of intramuscular force production. You need to recruit as many muscle fibers as possible. All this happens when you're using heavy loads. If you're using 85% of your 1 rep max and above, from rep 1, you're getting 100% fiber recruitment. That makes the set very effective. If you're using less, 60, 65%, you're going to have to do more reps, get closer to failure, things like that. So lifting heavier weight will actually cause less soreness, less fatigue, and generally just cause less soreness and less fatigue. So my recommendation is stick with sets of 5 to 10 reps most of the time on most stuff. And again, depending on your joint health and the exercise and the body part you're training, your training age, your biological age, you may need to do higher reps. Nothing wrong with that. If you can only overhead press at 15 reps and above because anything else kills your shoulders, well, then there's your answer. These are guidelines, but you have to listen to your body and you have to be smart and protect your joints. All right, next up is using the wrong exercises. To build muscle, you need to focus on big compound movements, exercises that recruit a lot of muscle. These moves should fit your unique structure, right? Everyone has individual, bone lengths, and all different things about your anatomy are different. Yours is different from mine. It's different from Bill's. It's different from Chris's. We're all different, right? So there's no possible way that every single exercise fits every single person. For example, if 4 of us were going to squat and we're 7 feet, 6 feet, 5 feet, and 4 feet tall, then there's no way that the perfect squat is going to work for all of us. One guy might need to do a belt squat. One guy might need to do a goblet squat. One guy might be fine with a safety bar squat with heels elevated, and the other guy might have to do a hack squat. It really depends. Everyone can do or should do the general movement patterns, right? So we should be able to squat. We should be able to do some type of hinge. We should be able to do any kind of horizontal pressing and pulling, generally not problematic. I mean, of course, a bench press is going to be problematic for a lot of people, but there's always something you can do in there. And an overhead, a vertical pull, most people can do. The overhead press is where we get a vertical press is where we get into issues with some people and their joint health, where even that you can modify. Whereas instead of doing it straight up and down, standing or on a 90-degree bench, you could do it on a 75-degree incline bench or a 60-degree incline bench. There's always ways to do it. And in terms of using the wrong exercises, those are some things that you want them to fit your structure. You want your joints to be stacking properly. And of course, they should not cause pain. Ideally, the exercise, the resistance profile of the exercise, the machine you're using, whatever it is, would match your body's natural strength curve. And the movement wouldn't require, if we're just looking at building muscle, generally we want to reduce the amount of stability required. Meaning, if I were to squat standing on a wobble board or a Swiss ball, that's not going to be good for training my legs, my quads to grow, because it's just really a stability act, right? It's a balancing act. Now, if I'm flat on the floor with a barbell, that's exponentially better. If I am now supported with my back against the back of a pad on a pendulum squat or a hack squat, that's actually better because now there's nothing to balance. There's no stability required. That doesn't mean that a hack squat's going to be better than a barbell back squat. It's just something to keep in mind. Some of your exercises should have a low stability requirement, and that, again, allows you to produce more force. You produce less force when there is a great stability requirement. Like, think about doing a single leg RDL with your back foot not elevated, just floating in the air. There's a lot of stability required there. Now, if we put your back foot on a foam roller or on a bench, there's less stability. So you're able to produce more force, and it's a more effective exercise. And then finally, we drop that foot so both feet are on the ground. Now we're doing an RDL. It's more stable. So the last version is the best version for hypertrophy in that order that I just listed. The next mistake is using crappy form. To maximize your gains, you want to ensure that your form is spot on. You always want to be striving for the best technique that you can do. Make each rep a masterpiece. Make it a work of art. Make it better than the last one. Most people just go in and they're just hoisting weight with crappy technique. They're using weights that are too heavy for them to control. At any point on the negative portion, the eccentric portion of the lift, you should be able to stop it. So if I were standing there training with you and you're a third of the way down, I should say stop and you could hold it. You're halfway down, I should say stop and you could hold it. 2 inches off your chest or 2 inches out of the bottom of the squat, I should say stop and you should hold it, so that we're not using momentum. Now we're using weight we can control, we own, we're dominating the weight, we're not getting dominated by the weight. This is mastery. Then we don't use the stretch reflex, meaning we don't control, and then wham! What you'll notice, a lot of people will control, they'll go down about 3 inches, then that last 2 to 6 inches, they will just smash into the bottom, smash the bar into their chest, drop out on the bottom of a squat, and rebound out of the bottom using that momentum and that stretch reflex. We want to minimize that as much as possible, and we want to master the transition, meaning you're coming down in that eccentric, and this is basically what I just described. It's just a phrase I use, mastering the transition, right? So we're coming down, controlling that eccentric, and then we reverse it, and it doesn't look like anything explosive or crazy or like a car crash. It's just we've come down slowly under control, and now all of a sudden we're on the way back up, and the eye barely even noticed what happened there. We're controlling, and now we're on the way back up. Now, a lot of times you'll hear control the negative and explode out of the bottom. If you have joint issues or you're over 40, don't explode out of the bottom. I've had people who say my back kills when I squat, and I say, let me see you squat. And with the bar, they explode out of the bottom. I say, try not exploding out of the bottom. The first 2 inches out of the bottom, I want you to take 2 inches to come out, and I want you to create as much tension in your quads as possible and leg press the floor away from you. And all of a sudden they go, holy shit, my back doesn't hurt anymore. Now think about if you're coming down with a weight on your spine and you're lowering, and then all of a sudden you reverse it. What happens to that weight? It compresses your spine more than if you just gradually came down and then slowly reverse back up. If you explosively reverse it, all of a sudden your spine gets compressed a little bit more. And that's how we're able to remove some of that back pain from squatting, is just slowly coming out of that transition under much more control. And again, leg pressing the floor away and really maximizing tension in the muscle. And you should do this on any exercise. Master that transition, control, and before you even bounce and start trying to reverse and get that weight up, you want to contract the muscle that you're targeting. So at the bottom of a bench press, before we bounce and just explode up and say, get this weight off of me, we should be able to really feel as much tension as possible on the chest and then drive the weight up using the chest, not just using anything that will get the weight up. Front delts, shoulders, lats, whatever, all those muscles are going to contribute, but let's try to target the muscle, focus on the target muscle we're trying to train, and push without exploding, without momentum, and without causing more wear and tear and unnecessary stress on the joints. Next mistake is not training hard enough. For a set to stimulate muscle growth, it should be close to failure. It should be within 1 or 2 reps shy of failure. Sometimes I will say 3 reps shy of failure if it's a big, complex barbell lift like an RDL, a free weight squat, a standing barbell press, something like that, because that requires a lot more control, coordination, skill. It's a lot riskier to push yourself to failure on an exercise like that than it is on a machine which is already stabilized for you. So just keep that in mind. But you still have to be taking those sets very close to failure, training hard, 1 to 2. Again, if it's a barbell lift, 3 reps shy of failure max. And you must also pursue progressive overload. Those are 2 keys. Progressive overload is really the fundamental principle of successful training, meaning, and a lot of people confuse progressive overload. Progressive overload means only one thing. It doesn't mean adding more sets. It doesn't mean cutting down the rest periods between sets. It means you are able to do more reps with the same weight, meaning if you bench press 100 pounds for 6, next week or the following week or the following week, you should definitely be able to do 100 pounds for 7. It doesn't happen every single week linearly, but over time, you should be getting 7 reps with that weight, 8 reps with that weight, 10 reps with that weight, and then maybe you increase to 105, and now we're back down to 6, and then we step load up to 10, then we're back, then we go to 110, then we drop back down to 6 reps, things like that. Or you do more weight for the same reps, right? So if you got 100 for 6, now we do 102.5 or 105 for 6. Something has to happen, either more reps with the same weight or more weight done for the same amount of reps. Progressive overload. Otherwise, your body never changes, and we've all seen those people in the gym who go to the gym for years. They look the exact same. They never change. Well, the reason is they're not pursuing progressive overload, and again, they're not training hard enough. Most people simply don't train it hard enough. They're going through the motions, which is really a waste of time. They'd be better off just playing golf or knitting or doing something else. It's not really stimulating any muscle growth. It's not stimulating strength gains. It's not even, quite frankly, it's not even preventing muscle loss. It's really a waste of time. And some people might say, well, at least I'm getting my heart rate up and doing cardio. Well, then just do cardio. Just do regular cardio, because you're getting nothing out of that but just wear and tear on your joints for no return on investment. So train harder and always push progressive overload. So those are the 5 biggest muscle building mistakes that kill your gains. I'm going to add a few more bonus questions onto this episode. Some ones that I get quite frequently, I got recently on my Instagram stories. So we've done an entire episode on this, but it seems to be a topic that a lot of people are very interested in. I think because of the days, the times we live in where everyone has sky-high anxiety. And so I'm always getting questions about how do I reduce my anxiety. So a couple quick tips. And a lot of these go against the typical fitness advice. One is, do not drink a ton of water first thing in the morning. You always hear that advice, get up and slam 32 or 64 ounces of water. I disagree. Don't do that. Get up and eat, okay? So if you are someone that's high anxiety, intermittent fasting is the worst idea. Don't do that. Don't get up and chug water. You could have some water. Yeah, maybe you got up and peed a couple times during the night. You're a little dehydrated. You're thirsty. That's fine. Make sure you're putting element in your water. You don't just want plain water. Plain water does not hydrate you effectively. Make sure you're drinking water with element, and don't chug a ton. It's not like you're Patrick Ewing in the fourth quarter. You're not soaked with sweat. You're not super dehydrated when you wake up. People say, oh, you're so dehydrated when you wake up. Not really. You're fine. Drink a little bit of water to thirst and eat immediately if you're a high anxiety person. The other thing is, so you don't fast, don't go too long between meals. And the way you can tell if you're going too long between meals is your body temperature will start to drop. Usually people with high anxiety have a lower body temperature. So you want to eat until you get warm. If you feel that your hands and feet are cold, I guarantee you your anxiety is going to be higher. If your hands and feet are warm, I also guarantee you that your anxiety will not be as high. So you want to drink less water in the morning, drink less water in general, eat first thing in the morning, and don't go too long between meals without eating. Probably 3 hours is going to be max for high anxiety people. Make sure you eat enough carbs. Sugar is going to calm down your adrenals. Salt and sugar will calm down. Salt's going to calm down your adrenals. So make sure, that's why I said have element. Make sure you eat a lot of sodium, put a lot of salt on all your food. That's going to calm your adrenals first thing in the morning, so that's good. And then throughout the day, sugar is going to be your friend. Now, I don't mean table sugar. I don't mean have a Cap'n Crunch or Fruity Pebbles or something like that. I mean lots of fruit, honey. Believe it or not, even orange juice is okay. Dairy, carbs from dairy is totally fine, really good for your adrenals. Root vegetables, sweet potatoes, things like that, going to be great. And some people can tolerate grains. Some people, the grains will actually, you'll notice that if you have grains, an hour or two later, your body temperature plummets, you get cold and sweaty. A lot of people will notice this post-workout, right? If you just have a whey protein shake and either white rice or cereal or something like that, your blood sugar plummets within an hour or so, and you're cold and clammy and sweaty and nauseous. That's what happened there. So you need to do one of two things. Either eat some more fat and eat some more fiber with the post-workout high insulinogenic carbs like the white rice or the cereal, or just note that you can't, maybe you don't tolerate grains that well, or simple grains like white rice, right? Maybe you do better with oatmeal. I don't know. Maybe you do better with sourdough. I don't know. It's individual. Most people generally tend to do fairly well with sweet potatoes. Now, sweet potatoes are high in oxalates, so if that's an issue for you, just be aware of that. If you're someone that has a history of kidney stones personally or in the family, I probably wouldn't be eating an inordinate amount of sweet potatoes. Generally, white rice is going to be the safest grain for most people most of the time. Cut down on stimulants, obviously. Don't get up and slam coffee. Have coffee 90 minutes after you've been awake, ideally after you've eaten food. Cut stimulants down in general. Get out in nature more. Get natural sunlight. Do deep breathing. Get in a sauna. Get around people that make you feel good, make you laugh, make you feel loved, that you loved. And, I covered it there, people that make you laugh, but build laughter into your day. Watch stand-up comedy, do whatever you can to laugh. Get off social media. If you're not making money on social media, maybe you shouldn't be on there. Because I know a lot of people that aren't using it for business, they're just using it to get annoyed, to get riled up, to get fired up, to get pissed off, to get bitter, to get jealous, and to crank up their anxiety. Don't do that. There's no need to be on social media if you don't have to. You could do something else. And then check your screen time for a report on how much you're using social media. If it's 3, 4, 5 hours, you got to be honest with yourself at the end of the day. What could I have done with that time? Could I have started a side business? Could I have read, 2 extra books a month, 3 extra books a month? Could I have donated my time somewhere? Whatever it might be, there's so much more. And lastly, of course, get more sleep. You always need more sleep to do everything better and certainly reduce anxiety. Next question. Talk about deloads. How often should we take a deload and what should they look like? Well, if your training frequency and your volume and your intensity is set optimally, there may never be a need to take a deload. Okay? This is, comes more from powerlifting, where guys are peaking for an event and then they'll overtrain and then they'll taper back. Overreaching is a term for it. You don't really need to do that. If you're just the average guy or girl looking to get jacked, build some muscle, be lean, be strong, be functional, be mobile, move well without pain, you probably don't need to take a deload because you don't need to push your training volume that high. You don't need to push your training intensity that high. It should be optimized, and therefore you would never really need a deload because you're not really overtraining. Now, if you are overtraining, then a deload might be necessary. It really depends. Maybe once every 8 weeks, once every 12 weeks, once every 16 weeks. It really depends how you are feeling. And if you're noticing that, I'm getting sore more often, my joints are getting banged up more often, then for sure, then we have an issue. Then you do need a deload. You're not getting stronger. You're getting weaker. You are actually losing size, losing weight. Your appetite's going down. You can't sleep. All these would be signs of overtraining that you probably need a deload. And in that case, then what I would do is one of two things. Number one is you could just simply reduce your training volume by about 40% and back off where the hardest you go is 3 reps shy of failure on anything. The other option is just simply take a week off or take 5 days off. That's my preferred option because it helps you from a mental perspective too. Like, okay, I'm out of the gym now after 5, 6, 7 days. I'm foaming at the mouth to come back. I'm looking forward to it. Not just it's a drag. How am I going to plow through this state of fatigue and overtraining? So I think that's the better option there. Last question. I have back issues and I don't want to squat. What can I do instead? Well, there's a few ways to address this. First of all, you might be able to do a squat variation. You might be able to do something like a belt squat, a pendulum squat, a hack squat. Okay, so first and foremost, a lot of people say, I can't squat. They're talking about a barbell back squat. Yes, a lot of people cannot do that. Now, sequenced properly, can you squat in general? Well, I know you can do a belt squat, but if it's sequenced properly, can you do a safety bar heels elevated squat? Sequenced properly meaning, what if I do some kind of leg curl or glute ham first? If I do the adductor machine or maybe a Copenhagen plank first? If I do a leg extension or Peterson step up or a backward sled drag? And maybe I do some single leg stuff like a split squat. Maybe even add in a glute bridge or hip thrust, and now I squat. Now squatting feels exponentially better because a lot of people have just been conditioned to think if I'm going to squat, it's going to be first in the workout. If you're over 40 and if you're a lot of people over 35, that feels awful, squatting first in the workout. So if you do what I just said and you sequence it in that order, it's probably going to feel 1,000 times better. Not probably, it's definitely going to feel 1,000 times better. Now, what if you still don't feel great? Take the tips I gave earlier about squatting and mastering that transition. Now it may feel better. So there's so many things, so many layers to this answer, right? Your form, your squat variation, and did you sequence it properly? And then lastly, okay, so now the free weight squat still hurts. Your back is just jacked. No problem. Try a pendulum squat. Try a hack squat. If you have a really well-designed pendulum or hack squat, I'd be willing to bet a ton of money that doing it with the form I told you and sequencing the order I suggested, it does not feel bad. If even that sucks and still hurts, then just stick with unilateral single leg stuff. Split squats, there's a million different ways to do split squats, a lot of different ways to do lunges, step ups, sled drags. Now you could still do leg curls, glute ham raises, hip thrusts, RDLs, back raises, leg extensions, reverse Nordics. There's a ton of exercises you can do other than squatting for legs. And then just do single leg stuff. Like I said, all the lunge and split squat variations. You could do a single leg press if that works for you. So many ways to work around that pain. And guys, that wraps it up for today. That's all I got. If you want to work with me one-on-one for any of this, for coaching, let me know. Shoot me a DM on Instagram, just with the word coaching, all caps. And thank you so much for listening. Please leave a review of the show on iTunes if you haven't. Please support our sponsors. Please leave a 5-star review on iTunes if you haven't done that. If you're listening to the show, tag me on Instagram. Always appreciate seeing that. And make sure you follow me on Instagram for any and all updates to when I'm doing these Q&As, so you guys have your chance to ask your question for me to answer it. Appreciate you. Love you. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you next time. Peace.